It was a hot afternoon. The sun was burning bright, and people were rushing to find some shade. In the middle of all this, a simple man walked slowly towards the bank. His clothes were plain. His shoes were dusty. His face was calm, but his eyes had a deep story hidden inside. People passing by did not notice him. To them, he looked like just another poor man, maybe a farmer or a small shopkeeper. No one could guess who he really was. When he entered the bank, the cool air hit his face. He took a deep breath and looked around. The bank was full of busy workers, typing, talking, laughing. Nobody looked at him properly. Some stared for a second and then turned away, judging him silently. He quietly walked to the reception desk. "Yes? What do you want?" the lady at the desk asked without smiling. "I want to apply for a loan," he said, his voice polite and soft. The lady looked at him from head to toe. She raised her eyebrows but gave him a form. "Fill this," she said, and turned away to talk to someone else. The man sat on a chair in the corner. He filled out the form carefully. His handwriting was neat. After finishing, he stood up and waited at the manager's door. After some time, the manager called him inside. The manager was a well-dressed man with shiny shoes and a sharp tie. He looked at the man and gave a fake smile. "Yes, what can I do for you?" he asked, already sounding bored. "I have applied for a loan," the man said, handing over the papers. The manager took the papers lazily. He did not even read them properly. He saw the simple clothes, the dusty shoes, and decided everything in his mind within seconds. He smirked and said, "Sir, I'm sorry. Your application cannot be approved. You do not meet our requirements." The man looked at him calmly. "But you didn't even check my documents," he said softly. The manager leaned back in his chair and laughed a little. "Sir, we have experience. We know who can pay back and who cannot. Trust me, we are saving your time," he said, trying to sound smart. The man did not argue. He simply nodded. "Thank you for your time," he said, and stood up. As he turned to leave, the manager could not help but chuckle with his colleagues. Some staff members whispered behind his back. Some even laughed loudly, thinking he could not hear them. But he heard everything. Still, he kept walking with the same calm face. As he reached the door, he stopped. He turned slightly and said with a gentle smile, "It's okay. Sometimes people see only what they want to see. Maybe one day you will see the full picture." And with that, he walked out of the bank. The staff inside continued their day, laughing and gossiping about the poor man who dared to ask for a loan. But little did they know, the story had just begun. Outside the bank, the man stood for a moment under the burning sun. He looked at the bank's big name board, and a small proud smile came to his face. He took out his phone and made a call. "Yes," he said, "it's done. They rejected the application. Prepare the documents. I want the final meeting to happen next week." He ended the call and put the phone back into his pocket. His face was peaceful. There was no anger, no hate, only a quiet confidence that spoke louder than any words. This was not an ordinary man. He was not just a simple visitor. He was the silent owner of the very bank that had rejected him. But he wanted to teach them a lesson. Not with anger, not with shouting, but with patience, truth, and a powerful message. And so, the story moved towards a lesson they would never forget. A lesson they would remember for the rest of their lives. Long before he walked into that grand bank, before anyone laughed at his dusty shoes, there was a little boy living in a small broken house at the edge of a forgotten town. His name was Arman. He was born into poverty. His family had very little. Their house had holes in the roof. During rainy nights, he would sit with a small metal pot, catching the water drops that fell from above. Most days, they had only one meal, sometimes not even that. His father was a simple man, working as a cleaner in the market. His mother stitched clothes for the rich families of the town. Even with both of them working hard, there was never enough money. Armen had only 2 sets of clothes. His school uniform was torn from the sides, and his shoes had more holes than leather. Yet every morning, he would walk proudly to school. Other kids laughed at him. They called him poor boy, dusty shoes, and sometimes even worse. He heard every word, every laugh. But he never cried in front of them. He kept his head high, even when his heart felt heavy. At school, he sat quietly at the back. His books were old, passed down from students years before him. Sometimes the pages were missing. Sometimes they were torn. But Armen never complained. He would copy missing parts from the blackboard carefully, staying after class when others had gone home. He knew education was his only ticket out of misery. Every night, after helping his mother with her stitching, he would study under a broken lamp. The light flickered, but his hope did not. He dreamed big dreams, dreams bigger than his tiny world. One day, sitting alone on the steps of his school, he heard the principal talking to a teacher. "Poor kids like him," the principal said, not knowing Armen was listening. "They never make it far. They are born to stay small." Those words cut deeper than any insult. Armen clenched his fists. He made a promise to himself that day. "I will prove them wrong. I will rise so high that no one can ignore me." Life kept testing him. When he was 12, his father fell ill and could not work anymore. Armen had to leave school to help his family. He worked small jobs, cleaning, carrying heavy loads, selling tea at bus stops. Some days he earned only a few coins. Some days, nothing. But no matter how tired he was, he would read and study late at night. Sometimes he read newspapers he picked from trash bins. Sometimes old business magazines that people threw away. He learned about the world of money, banks, businesses, and success. He imagined himself wearing a clean suit, walking into a bank, not as a beggar, but as someone important. It was a crazy dream for a boy with torn shoes and an empty pocket. But Armen believed. He believed with a kind of faith that no poverty, no hunger, no insult could break. Years passed. His mother died when he was 17. His father passed away a year later. Armen was left alone in the world. No family, no money, only his dreams. It would have been easy to give up. Many in his town did. But Armen was different. He packed a small bag with 2 shirts, 1 trouser, and a book on banking he had found years ago. With a heart full of hope and a mind full of dreams, he left his town and moved to the city. The city was not kind. It swallowed weak people and laughed at their broken dreams. For days, Armen slept on footpaths. He bathed in public taps. He ate dry bread and drank water from public parks. But he kept going. He found a job cleaning tables at a small tea cafe. It paid little, but it was enough to buy a second-hand book on finance every month. Armen taught himself everything. How money moves, how businesses grow, how banks work. While others his age partied or wasted time, Armen built his knowledge, brick by brick. Slowly, he started saving small amounts. He started tiny businesses, selling tea, repairing phones, offering delivery services. Most of them failed, but each failure taught him something. He grew wiser, stronger, smarter, and he never, ever gave up. His struggles were not just about money. They were about dignity, about proving that no matter how poor your start is, your finish can be grand. He wanted to show the world that dreams are not reserved for the rich. They belong to those who dare to believe when no one else does. And so the boy with dusty shoes began his long, lonely journey towards greatness. A journey no one believed in, except him. A journey that would one day lead him back to the very people who once laughed at him. But this time, he would not come as a beggar. He would come as the city was full of lights, sounds, and endless crowds. For someone like Armen, It was both exciting and terrifying. He had no friends here, no family to support him. Only his dreams walked beside him like a quiet shadow. After months of cleaning tables and saving every single coin, Armin finally managed to rent a tiny shop on the edge of a busy street. It was nothing fancy, just 4 walls, a rusty shutter, and a broken signboard. But to Armin, it was a palace. He decided to start a small tea stall. He bought a second-hand kettle, some cheap tea leaves, and a few plastic chairs. Every morning before sunrise, he cleaned his little shop, boiled the water, and set up the chairs carefully. He would stand by the road, calling out politely to the people rushing to work. "Fresh tea. Good tea for a fresh start," he would say, smiling warmly. At first, very few people stopped. Some looked at his plain clothes and old kettle and walked away. Some made rude jokes, but Armin kept smiling. He knew respect was not given easily. It had to be earned, 1 cup of tea at a time. Slowly, things began to change. A tired office worker stopped once, then a rickshaw driver, then 2 students. They liked his tea. It was fresh, strong, and made with care. Word spread quietly. Within a few months, his little stall became a favorite spot for morning workers. Armin started making a small but steady income. He didn't spend it on fancy clothes or a better life. He spent it wisely. He bought a better kettle, better chairs, and even painted the walls of his shop himself. He also saved money for something more important, his next dream. At night, after closing the shop, while others slept, Armin would sit in his tiny room, reading books on business, finance, and banking. He was building something bigger inside his mind, something no one could see yet. But life was not always kind. One night, a group of drunk men broke into his shop. They destroyed his chairs, stole his money, and poured dirty water into his tea kettles. When Armin arrived the next morning, he stood silently, looking at the mess. For a few minutes, he said nothing. No tears, no anger. Then he rolled up his sleeves and started cleaning. People passing by watched him. Some shook their heads sadly. Some said he should give up. But Armin knew something they didn't. He knew that strength is not built when everything is easy. It is built when everything is broken, and you still choose to rise. Within a week, Armin fixed everything. He cleaned, repaired, and reopened his shop, stronger than before. This time, the community noticed. Customers not only returned, they brought others with them. Some even gave him extra money, saying, "You are an inspiration." Armin smiled and thanked them politely, but deep inside, he knew. This was just the beginning. Soon, he started selling small snacks along with tea, biscuits, samosas, and sandwiches. The income doubled. He hired a young boy from a poor village to help him. Armin didn't just want to rise alone. He wanted to lift others with him. In 2 years, his one tiny stall turned into 3. He opened a second tea stall near a school and a third near a construction site. He trained his helpers well, not just how to make tea, but how to treat customers with respect and love. His brand became known for good service, clean tea, and a kind smile. Armin started earning more than he ever imagined, but he didn't stop dreaming. He began saving again, this time for something much bigger. He wanted to enter the world of real business. He knew he had to learn more. So he enrolled himself in night classes, learning finance, accounting, and small business management. He was the oldest student in the class, but he didn't care. While others laughed and played, Armin studied with full focus. Slowly, step by step, he built his knowledge and savings. Failures came again. A heavy storm destroyed one of his stalls. A dishonest partner ran away with some money. Each time, Armin took a deep breath, cleaned up the mess, and started again. Because he had learned the most powerful rule of success. Winners are not those who never fall. Winners are those who rise again and again, no matter how many times they fall. Armin's dreams were getting bigger. He wanted to own not just tea stalls. He wanted to own a company, a place where people like him, poor, judged, laughed at, could find respect and opportunities. He started exploring small investment options. He studied how banks worked, how they gave loans, and how they made profits. He understood that banks had power, the power to lift or crush dreams. And a small seed planted itself in his mind. What if, one day, he could own a bank? It sounded crazy. It sounded impossible. But Armin smiled to himself and thought, once, people said I couldn't sell a single cup of tea. Today, they wait in lines at my stall. He knew dreams were never too big. Only people's courage was sometimes too small. And he had made a promise to himself long ago. No matter how big the dream, he would never stop chasing it. Not until he reached it. Not until he changed the rules. Not until he built a place where no one was judged by dusty shoes ever again. As Armin's small tea business grew, so did his hunger to learn more. He was no longer just a boy selling tea. He was a young man dreaming of building an empire. But dreams alone were not enough. He needed knowledge, real business knowledge. One evening after closing his stall, Armin walked to the public library. It was a dusty old building, often ignored by the busy city people. Inside, there were hundreds of books, old, heavy, and filled with secrets of success. Armin spent hours there every night, reading about business, banks, and leadership. He read stories of men who built empires from nothing, men who started small but thought big. One evening, while he was reading a thick book on banking laws, an old man sitting nearby noticed him. The old man had a kind face, gray hair, and simple clothes. He watched Armin carefully. The way he read, the way he took notes, the way his eyes shined with quiet determination. After a few days of silent watching, the old man finally spoke. "You like learning about banks?" he asked with a soft smile. Armin looked up, a little shy but respectful. "Yes, sir," he replied. "I want to understand how they work. I want to build something one day." The old man chuckled gently. "Big dreams," he said, "but big dreams need big knowledge." Armin nodded, feeling a little embarrassed. The old man leaned closer and said, "My name is Mr. Karim. I used to work in the banking world for over 40 years. Armin's eyes widened. He couldn't believe his luck. A real banker, sitting right next to him. Mr. Karim smiled kindly and said, "If you really want to learn, I can teach you. But remember, knowledge is not free. It demands time, effort, and patience." Without thinking twice, Armin said, "I am ready, sir." And so began the most important chapter of Armin's life. Every evening after working at his tea stalls, Armin would rush to the library. There Mr. Karim would wait with a stack of books and handwritten notes. They studied everything, from how banks manage money, to how they invest, how they calculate risks, how they help or destroy businesses. Mr. Karim did not treat Armin like a child. He challenged him. He asked difficult questions. He gave him real-life problems to solve. At first, Armin struggled. Many nights, he went home tired, confused, and frustrated. Sometimes he wanted to quit. But then he remembered his childhood, the broken roof, the hunger, the laughter of the rich boys. And he pushed himself harder. Slowly, he started understanding complex things, things that even college students found difficult. Mr. Karim also taught him something even more valuable than banking: character. He said, "In business, your greatest weapon is not your money. It is your honesty, your patience, your ability to respect people when they have nothing to offer you." Armin listened carefully. He absorbed every word like a thirsty man drinks water. Months turned into years. During this time, Armin's tea stalls became even more popular. He opened 2 more stalls and hired more young boys who were poor and struggling like he once was. He trained them not just in making tea, but in dealing with customers with kindness and respect. Meanwhile, under Mr. Karim's mentorship, Armin's mind was becoming sharper, smarter, and more confident. One evening after a long study session, Mr. Karim closed his book and looked at Armin with proud eyes. "You are ready now," he said. Armin was confused. "Ready for what, sir?" he asked. Mr. Karim smiled warmly and handed him a small piece of paper. It had the address of a government office. "Tomorrow," Mr. Karim said, "go here and register your first real company. Not a tea stall, but a proper registered business." Armin's hands shook as he took the paper. All his life, he had been called a poor boy, a tea seller. Tomorrow, he would officially become a business owner. That night, Armin could not sleep. He stared at the ceiling of his small rented room, dreaming of the future. He remembered his mother stitching clothes by candlelight, his father coughing in his weak bed, the kids laughing at his torn shoes. And now, he was on the edge of something new, something big. The next morning, wearing his cleanest shirt and polished shoes, Armin went to the government office. The process was long and confusing, but every time he felt lost, he remembered Mr. Karim's teachings. He asked questions politely. He filled the forms carefully. He waited patiently in long lines. Finally, by evening, he held the official papers in his hands. He was now the owner of Armin Enterprises. It was a simple name. But behind that name was a storm of dreams, struggles, and silent promises. He thanked Mr. Karim that evening. The old man smiled and said, "I only showed you the door. You had the courage to walk through it." Armin knew he owed Mr. Karim a lot. But Mr. Karim said, "If you want to repay me, promise me one thing. When you become successful, don't forget the poor boys who sell tea with dusty shoes. Lift them up the way you lifted yourself." Tears filled Armin's eyes. "I promise, sir," he said. And he meant every word. The boy with broken shoes was now officially a businessman. But deep inside, he was still the same humble boy, full of dreams, full of gratitude, and full of fire. And he was just getting started. After registering his company, Armin Enterprises, Armin's life changed, but not overnight. Success was still far away, hidden behind more hard work, more struggles, and more patience. But now, Armin had something powerful. A name, a legal identity, a dream written on paper. He was no longer just a tea seller. He was a businessman, small but official. His first step as a new entrepreneur was to expand his tea stalls into proper small cafes. He rented 2 bigger shops and turned them into clean, beautiful places where workers, students, and even small businessmen could sit, relax, and enjoy. He named them Armin's Tea House. He focused on things that others ignored: clean tables, polite staff, fresh tea, and respect for every customer, rich or poor. Soon, his tea houses became the talk of the town. People loved the idea, a comfortable place for everyone, where a poor laborer and a young businessman could sit side by side without judgment. His small cafes started earning good profits. But Armin did not stop there. He remembered Mr. Karim's words: "Real growth happens when you invest wisely." Instead of spending his money on luxuries, Armin invested it. He bought a small delivery van and started supplying fresh tea and snacks to nearby offices. It was a simple idea, but no one else was doing it. Within 6 months, his delivery service became very popular. Big offices signed monthly contracts with him. His income tripled. With more money, Armin opened a 3rd tea house near the city center, a prime location. This was a bold move. The rent was high. The competition was tough. But Armin believed in himself. He offered better service, better tea, and most importantly, respect and kindness. One small act at a time, he was winning the hearts of the people. While others fought for quick profits, Armin built relationships. He remembered the days when no one respected him, and he made sure that no customer ever felt invisible in his cafes. Every single worker he hired was treated like family. He trained them not just to serve tea, but to serve dignity. Within 3 years, Armin's small tea business grew into a recognizable brand across the city. He had 5 tea houses, 25 employees, a strong delivery network, and a growing bank balance. People started noticing him. Local newspapers wrote about the tea seller who dreamed big. Business magazines wanted to interview him. Young boys from villages came to the city just to work with him. He became a symbol of hope, proof that poverty was not a prison if you had the courage to fight it. But Armin was not satisfied yet. He remembered his bigger dream, to own a bank. He knew he was still far from that goal. So he started investing even more wisely. He entered small real estate deals, buying cheap land on the edge of the city. When the city expanded, the land prices skyrocketed. Armin sold some plots and made huge profits. He used that money to buy shares in small companies. He studied the stock market during the night, sometimes falling asleep with business books still open on his chest. Every coin he earned, he made it work for him. Within 5 years, Armin was no longer a small businessman. He was a quiet, growing power in the city. People started calling him the Silent Storm because he rose so steadily, without noise, without drama, without showing off. But inside, Armin still carried the pain of rejection, humiliation, and poverty. And he used that pain as fuel. He dreamed of building a financial institution, a place where small businesses could get loans without being judged by their clothes or background. But when he first applied for a business loan at a big bank, they laughed at him. They saw a young man in simple clothes, not a wealthy businessman. They rejected his application without even reading his business plan. They treated him the same way he was treated as a child, with disbelief and disrespect. That night, Armin stood outside the bank, holding the rejection letter in his hand. The cold wind hit his face. For a moment, he felt the old sadness returning. The same sadness from his childhood when he was called Dusty Shoes. But then he smiled. He remembered something Mr. Karim once said. When they reject you, don't get angry. Get better. Get stronger. One day, they will regret it. Armin made a decision that night. He would not beg for their approval. He would build something bigger, his own financial company. One that would one day challenge the very banks that rejected him. He started gathering knowledge about microfinance, banking regulations, and business funding. He met other small business owners, understood their pain, and built a network. He started a small investment company, helping small businesses with loans and guidance. It grew fast because he treated people with respect and gave opportunities where big banks only gave rejection. Slowly, he built trust. Slowly, he built power. The boy with dusty shoes was becoming a man with a golden touch. And yet, he stayed humble. He still visited his first tea stall every Sunday, sitting with the workers, drinking tea, remembering where he started. He knew that real power was not just in money. Real power was in kindness, patience, and the unstoppable courage to rise again and again. Armin's empire was growing, but his real victory was not the money he made. His real victory was the lives he touched, the hope he spread, and the promise he kept to himself long ago. One day, I will build a place where no one is judged by their clothes or their poverty. And that day was getting closer, very close. Armin stood before the heavy oak door of the bank's main conference room. He pressed the button for entry and waited. Inside, the bank manager, his old receptionist, and a dozen senior staff were gathering. None of them knew who would lead this special meeting. A moment earlier, Armin had sent each of them a formal invitation. It read, "Please join me for a private meeting at 10 a.m. Important matters will be discussed." They assumed it was another routine business update. They had no idea the storm was coming. At exactly 10, the door clicked open. The manager stepped in first, followed by the receptionist and the rest. They passed under a sign that read Board Meeting, Level 4. The room was cool, Silent, and all eyes turned to the head of the table. Armin entered, wearing a crisp suit for the first time in months. His dusty shoe days were long behind him, but he carried the same calm smile. The staff exchanged confused glances. "Good morning," Armin said softly. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice." His voice was steady, polite. The manager cleared his throat. "Sir, with all due respect, who is leading this meeting?" he asked, trying to sound confident. Armin pointed to the polished nameplate on the table behind him. "Mr. Armin Khan, chairman and owner." Silence. Their jaws dropped. Their eyes grew wide. The manager's face turned pale. The receptionist gasped and covered her mouth. They looked at each other, then back at Armin, as if seeing him for the first time. After a long pause, the manager stammered, "But we rejected your loan application 6 months ago. You were in torn shoes and old clothes. We laughed at you." "We?" Armin held up his hand gently. "Yes," he said, "you did. And I understand why. You saw a poor man. You did not see the full picture." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The staff looked down, ashamed. Some faces were wet with tears. The receptionist's eyes welled up as she recalled her mocking laughter. The manager pressed his lips tight and dared not meet Armin's gaze. Armin continued, "I did not call you here for revenge. I called you here for change." He let that word hang in the air. "I have watched this bank for years. I saw how you decide who gets a chance and who does not. I saw how you judge on clothes instead of character." He walked slowly to the head of the table. "I bought this bank because I believe in second chances. I believe that people with dusty shoes can have gold hearts. I believe this bank can serve everyone, not just the wealthy." He uncapped a marker and wrote on the whiteboard behind him, "Respect every applicant. Speedy, fair decisions. No judgment on appearance. Community fund for the needy." He turned and faced them. "Effective today," he said, "these are our new rules. Every loan officer will see only the documents, not the face. We will set up a community fund to support small entrepreneurs who lack collateral. We will give them guidance, not just a verdict." The manager's shoulders slumped. "Mr. Khan," he said softly, I am deeply sorry. We let our pride decide. We forgot our duty to help people." His voice cracked. Armin nodded. "I forgive you," he replied. "But forgiveness alone is not enough. We must do better." He pressed a button on the table. The door opened and a group of small business owners entered. They were bakers, tailors, tea sellers, people just like Armin had been. They stood quietly, waiting. Armin said, "These are your new clients. They are people with dreams. They will receive fair hearings, honest advice, and real support." The owners stepped forward, acceptance letters in hand, tears of relief on their faces. The bank staff looked on, stunned. They watched the same faces they might have dismissed just a week earlier, now welcomed with respect. Some bankers wiped away tears. Others bowed their heads in shame. Armin closed the meeting with one final message. "This bank will change lives, not just accounts. And together, we will prove that respect costs nothing but yields everything." The staff rose to their feet, one by one, and applauded. It was not a polite clap. It was a heartfelt ovation. In that moment, they understood what they had missed for so long. As the new clients left with smiles and hope, the manager approached Armin. He extended his hand. "Thank you for giving us a lesson we will never forget." Armin shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for listening," he replied. Behind him, on the whiteboard, the new rules glowed in the morning light. They were simple words, but they carried the weight of a promise born from rejection and turned into redemption. And so the boy with dusty shoes, who once walked in for a loan, walked out as the owner of the bank, not to punish, but to uplift. The staff would remember this day forever. The day their world turned upside down, and their hearts were turned right side up. Armin arrived early, as he always did. He walked past the polished counters and greeted each staff member by name. This was no longer just a building full of suits and ledgers. It was a place where dreams took flight. At counter number 3, a young woman in faded clothes approached nervously. She held a torn folder of papers, exactly the kind of applicant who would once have been turned away. "Good morning," she said softly, looking at the floor. Armin knelt beside her. "Good morning," he replied, his voice kind. "What can I help you with today?" "My name is Sarah," she said, "and I want a small loan to buy a sewing machine." I don't have much." Armin smiled. "Sarah, here at this bank, we look at your heart and your plan, not your clothes. Let's see your documents." Sarah handed over her papers. A loan officer took them, glanced briefly, then nodded and invited her to the next room for a meeting. Sarah's eyes widened with surprise and relief. As she walked away, a single tear rolled down her cheek. Armin watched with a gentle pride. This was the moment he had been working for, one life lifted by one act of respect. Stories of change. Throughout the day, similar scenes unfolded. A rickshaw driver, Manu, who needed funds to repair his vehicle, received the loan he needed to keep working. A small bakery owner, Mrs. Hassan, whose flour mill had broken down, got just enough support to restart her ovens. A college student, Ravi, from a remote village, was approved for a study loan, his ticket to becoming the first in his family to graduate. Each story was a quiet triumph. Word spread quickly through the city. The bank under its new owner gave fair chances, no matter who you were. That evening, the lobby was filled with gratitude. Small business owners brought homemade sweets. Students sent thank you letters. Even the newspaper headline read, "The Bank That Cares. How One Man's Promise Changed Lives." Armin read the stories and smiled at Mr. Karim's message echoing in his mind. Lift them up the way you lifted yourself. Reflection on the journey. Late that night, Armin returned to his first tea stall. The soft hum of conversation and the smell of fresh chai welcomed him like an old friend. The young boy who worked there recognized him and came forward. "Sir, your favorite, ginger tea," he said, handing over a steaming cup. Armin took a sip and closed his eyes, tasting memories of struggle and hope. He thought of the broken roof where he once caught rain in a pot. He thought of the mocking laughter in that very bank lobby. He thought of every night he stayed up reading under a flickering lamp. In that moment, he felt gratitude for every failure and every teacher, especially Mr. Karim. He felt the weight of every name he had encountered, from Sarah to Manu to Ravi. And he realized, this was the true power he had always sought, not the piles of money or the fancy nameplate on the door, but the chance to give dignity back to people who needed it most. A promise fulfilled. The next morning, the bank's boardroom filled again. This time, not for lectures or policy changes, but for celebration. The entire staff gathered, and Armin stood at the head of the table. Today, he began, "I want to thank each of you. You have learned to see people beyond appearances. You have shown kindness where it was once missing. You have built something real." He paused, looking at every face. This bank belongs to the community now. Let us never forget that. He held up a small crystal trophy engraved with the motto, "Respect costs nothing." The staff cheered, and tears of joy filled the room. Years passed. The seasons changed again and again. The world outside grew louder, faster, and more crowded. But inside the hearts of many people in the city, one name stayed alive. Armin Khan. The boy with dusty shoes. The man who turned rejection into revolution. The dreamer who refused to give up. A city transformed. Under Armin's leadership, the bank became much more than a place for money. It became a place for hope. Thousands of small businesses were born because of small loans. Tea stalls, grocery stores, mobile repair shops, tailoring businesses, small delivery services, each one a new dream taking flight. Neighborhoods that were once dark and broken slowly filled with the lights of new shops and the smiles of working families. Children who once cleaned streets were now going to school. Mothers who once begged for food were now proud business owners. Old men who once sat in hopeless silence now gave advice to young entrepreneurs. And every time someone succeeded, they remembered to say one silent thank you. Not to a government, not to a stranger, but to a man who had once believed when nobody else did. Armin's growing vision. But Armin was not done. He started visiting villages far from the city, places where banks had never even opened a branch, places where hope was just a dream people spoke of around fires. He sat with farmers under trees. He listened to weavers in dusty workshops. He talked to young girls who wanted to open schools, to boys who dreamed of building farms. Armin created a mobile bank on wheels, vans that traveled deep into remote villages to offer services. The people cheered when the vans arrived. They called it Armin's Angels. He trained hundreds of young men and women from these villages to become future bankers, business mentors, and social workers. Armin believed, give them a chance, and they will build a future greater than we ever imagined. The letter from Mr. Karim. One morning, Armin received a letter. It was from an old, familiar hand. Mr. Karim, his first teacher and mentor, now retired and living quietly in a mountain village. The letter read, "My dear Armin, I always knew you would go far, but you have gone farther than I dreamed. You built not just buildings, but hearts. Always remember, the tallest tree bows the lowest. Stay humble, stay kind, keep planting seeds of hope wherever you walk. Proudly yours, Karim." Armin folded the letter carefully and kept it in his wallet. He carried it everywhere, a reminder that no matter how high he climbed, his roots were in kindness. A new generation. In the city's largest university, a new scholarship was started under Armin's name, the Dusty Shoes Scholarship, for students from poor backgrounds who wanted to change the world. Every year, hundreds of young boys and girls who once had no dreams walked proudly on stage to collect their awards. Many of them started businesses, schools, charities, and even new banks of their own, spreading Armin's mission further and further. They carried forward the message, judge by dreams, not by appearances. They built a new world, not just richer in money, but richer in humanity.